The man in my living room, a drunken betrayal, and the judge who demanded answers. The air in the television studio was cold, sterile, and thick with a silence that felt like a held breath. A stark contrast to the storm of shattered trust and broken lives that was about to unfold under the unflinching gaze of the most famous judge in America. Lisa, a 37-year-old woman with weary eyes that spoke of private battles, sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, a portrait of a mother whose safe haven had been violently invaded. Across from her, slouching with a nonchalance that seemed both practiced and deeply out of place, was Keith, a 35-year-old construction worker whose own gaze was shifty, avoiding the piercing eyes of the woman who held his fate in her hands. And between them, a force of nature in a black robe, was Judge Judy, her expression a mask of impatient skepticism, ready to dissect the messy, dangerous entanglement that had brought these two souls into her courtroom. This was not just a case about a broken door. It was a story of addiction, of terrible choices, of a friendship poisoned by liquor, and the chilling moment a woman discovered that the man she considered a friend had become a menacing stranger passed out on her couch, forcing her to confront a terrifying question: how far would a person go for a drink? And what lines would they cross when in the grip of their demons? The proceedings began not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating admission. Judge Judy fixed her sharp eyes on Keith. "An alcohol problem?" she asked, her voice cutting through the formalities with surgical precision. The question hung in the air, simple, direct, and utterly inescapable. "Yes," Keith mumbled, the word leaving his lips like a reluctant confession dragged from the depths of his soul. This was the foundation upon which this entire tragic drama was built, a foundation of instability and addiction. Judge Judy leaned forward, a predator cornering its prey, demanding specifics, timelines, the hard facts of a soft, deteriorating life. "For how long and when?" she pressed, her tone leaving no room for vague excuses or meandering justifications. Keith shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of his own history pressing down on him. I had an alcohol problem. Well, it was a progression, of course, over the course of," he stammered, trying to cloak a decade of struggle in passive language. But Judge Judy would have none of it. "Give me years," she commanded, her voice a whip crack that demanded concrete answers from the fog of his past. He surrendered the timeline. About 10 years. Let's say 2003 to I got, sober in 2013. A full decade lost to the bottle, a decade of mornings he couldn't remember, and nights he probably wished he could forget. But the story didn't end there. Judge Judy, with the relentless precision of a master investigator, turned the screw further. "And you have an alcohol problem, is that correct, sir?" she asked again, ensuring the record was perfectly, painfully clear. "Correct, Your Honor," Keith admitted, the title feeling foreign on his tongue. "No, not anymore," he added, a flicker of defensive pride in his voice, a claim to a redemption that was about to be severely tested. But Judge Judy was already moving, her mind connecting dots that Keith hadn't even drawn. She revealed the damning evidence he himself had written, reading his own words back to him with a tone of pure, undiluted disbelief. "I'm reading your own answer, Mr. Nelson. Your own answer is, Lisa wanted a relationship with me and allowed me into her condo whenever I wanted. She's hiding her infatuation with me from her father because I drink and Lisa is a recovering alcohol." That's what you wrote in your answer. The arrogance of the statement was breathtaking, a fantasy of infatuation constructed, perhaps, to justify the unjustifiable. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "So I'm going to ask you again, you have a drinking problem?" The truth, once more, was forced into the open. "Yes, Your Honor." A quiet, desperate interjection came from Lisa, a woman trying to throw a life preserver to a man who was actively drowning them both. "He has recently stopped, Your Honor." But Judge Judy's verdict on that was swift and merciless, a pronouncement born of decades of seeing the same patterns repeat themselves. "Not recently enough, sir. Been in the business a long time." The message was clear. A claim of recent sobriety meant little in the face of a decade-long problem and the fresh wounds of his actions. The spotlight of scrutiny then swung with brutal force onto Lisa. Judge Judy's gaze was incredulous, almost disappointed. "Now you knew he had a drinking problem. What are you doing hanging around somebody with a drinking problem?" It was the question every friend and family member of an addict has asked themselves in the mirror. A question laced with frustration, fear, and self-recrimination. Lisa had no good answer, because in the world of addiction, there are no good answers, only terrible choices and their devastating consequences. Probably not the best choice, but she trailed off, her voice small, defeated. She was a woman caught in her own spiral, a recovering alcoholic who had stumbled and fallen hard. I myself had started drinking again when I moved in, she confessed, the words a painful whisper of a relapse, a dream of sobriety shattered. And we're drinking buddies. The term was so casual, so ordinary for a relationship that was so profoundly toxic. And we're drinking together, Judge Judy clarified, her voice flat. So that was after 2013? She confirmed, pinning down the timeline of this collective downfall. Right, I fell off the wagon, Lisa admitted, the old phrase carrying the weight of 1,000 failures. I got it, said Judge Judy, and in that moment, she truly did. The entire sordid picture was now clear for the entire court to see. So then you have two adults, because he's certainly an adult, and you are how old? 37? He's 35. 35. You have two adults who both had drinking problems, both serious drinking problems, hanging around together. A terrible mixture. She labeled it with the simple, accurate finality it deserved. It was a chemical reaction waiting for a spark, a pact of mutual destruction forged over bottles and bad decisions. Do we understand each other so far, sir? She asked Keith, ensuring he grasped the precarious, self-inflicted nature of the situation he was in. He nodded, the gravity of the circumstance beginning to dawn on him, a slow, creeping realization that this was not a casual chat, but an inquisition into his very character. Then, Judge Judy issued the command that would bring the heart of the darkness into the light. Now I want you to tell me exactly what you are alleging that he did. And so, Lisa began to weave her tale, a story that started with the mundane and spiraled into a waking nightmare. Okay, she said, taking a deep, steadying breath, gathering the fragments of that terrible day. So on, February 19th, I had come home from work, in the evening. She painted a picture of a normal day, a mother returning from her job, her thoughts likely on her 1-year-old son, on dinner, on the simple, quiet evening that lay ahead. But normalcy was about to be shattered. And when I came home, I found Keith passed out on my couch, which he was not allowed to be in my home. The image was jarring, unsettling. A man, a drinking buddy, unconscious in her private space, a place where her infant son slept and played. The violation was immediate and visceral. She detailed the morning prior, a scene of deceptive normalcy. Prior to me leaving for work, I had sent him home and I had checked all the doors. She was emphatic, her voice gaining strength as she relived the meticulous actions she had taken to secure her home, to create a barrier between her family and the chaos of her addiction, to make sure they were locked. She was a mother lion protecting her den, a woman trying to maintain a sliver of control in a life that was spinning out of it. Judge Judy, ever the seeker of clarity, interjected, "Just a second. So he spent the night?" "No, he had come in the morning because he was right above me." This detail, that he was her neighbor, living directly above her, added another layer of unease. This wasn't a stranger. This was a man with constant, easy access, a man who knew her routines, her vulnerabilities. The morning of the incident was described with a haunting clarity. "He came in the morning, and what did you do when he came in the morning?" Judge Judy asked, piecing together the final moments before the breach. We had our normal, we talked, and he helped me get my son in the car as I left for work." The picture was almost wholesome, a picture of friendly, neighborly assistance. He had helped her with her baby. He had been part of the morning ritual. And then she had done what she always did. And, then I came back in the house, walked him out, checked all. She was a creature of habit, of precaution, or at least she tried to be. Judge Judy, with the instincts of a detective, honed in on the most crucial element in this entire tragedy, the child. "How old is your son?" "He's 1. The answer landed like a punch to the gut. This was not just a story about two drinkers. It was a story about a 1-year-old boy whose world was populated by unstable adults. "Other than you, who takes care of him?" Judge Judy probed, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. I get assist. My parents help watch him. But, I'm his soul." Lisa was the sole caregiver, a mother battling her own demons while trying to raise a son. And then came the final, devastating piece of the puzzle, the secret that fueled the entire calamity. But your parents didn't know you had fallen off the wagon. No, they did not. There it was. The shame, the secrecy, the double life. She was hiding her relapse from the very people who could have provided a safety net, forcing her to rely on the one person who was just as lost as she was, Keith. The narrative then turned to the hours leading up to the violation. Judge Judy asked the inevitable damning question. Okay, so he helped you get your son in the car. Had you been drinking with him the night before? Yes. So, the day of the break-in was preceded by a night of drinking. The boundaries were already blurred, the lines of appropriate behavior already smudged by alcohol. And he went up to his house. He came down in the morning. He helped you get your son in the car. You left for work, came home, found him in your apartment, and Judge Judy guided her back to the moment of discovery, the climax of the story. And Lisa described the surreal, frightening conversation that followed. And I said, "How did you get in here?" And I had locked all the doors. And his response was, "It was open." And I said, "I know it wasn't open. I had locked all of the doors." I checked, and I double-checked, and they were locked. So how did you get in? Her frustration and fear were palpable in the retelling. This was not a simple misunderstanding. This was a direct challenge to her own sanity, her own memory of securing her home. And then Keith offered his explanation, a story so flimsy it was an insult to her intelligence. And then he proceeded to say that he came downstairs to have a cigarette on my patio, and he had noticed that my slider to my bedroom was open. And so he had come inside to make sure there was nobody inside the property. And nobody was there, and that was the story of the concerned neighbor, the gallant protector. But Judge Judy immediately poked a massive, logical hole in this feeble narrative. Well, what was he doing passed out on the couch? If his mission was one of noble inspection, why did it end with him unconscious on her furniture? Lisa supplied the obvious answer, the only answer that made sense in the twisted logic of addiction. Well, he had been drinking in your apartment. Right, without me there. The truth was out. He hadn't just wandered in and left. He had stayed. He had helped himself to her alcohol, in her home, a space he knew was empty, a space where her child lived. He had consumed her liquor and then succumbed to it, passing out in a drunken stupor, leaving the evidence of his violation sleeping on her sofa. The final layer of the transgression was then revealed, the physical proof of the forced entry. Just a second. But he had been drinking in your apartment because that's where the alcohol was? Judge Judy confirmed, the motive now crystal clear. The alcohol was the magnet, the irresistible lure that pulled him past all boundaries of decency and law. Correct, Lisa said. And? Judge Judy prompted, sensing there was more. And that, I at that point, just dropped it. I had not noticed the door damage because when he broke in, he attempted to repair it. And I come in through my garage. I don't use the front door a whole lot. This was the ultimate insult. Not only had he broken into her home, not only had he drunk himself into a coma on her couch, but he had then tried to cover his tracks. He had used his construction skills to fix the damage he had caused, to erase the physical evidence of his crime, hoping she would never notice, that the entire incident would just fade into the fog of their drunken lives. So you're alleging in order to get into your house, he damaged the door. Judge Judy summarized, the charge now formal and severe. Yes, a broken door, a broken trust, a broken friendship. All for the sake of a bottle. When Keith was finally given a chance to speak to this, his defense was as arrogant as it was illogical, a statement that perfectly encapsulated his warped sense of entitlement. Santorit! Well, even if I broke the door, Your Honor, if I fixed it, it would have been fixed right because I do construction. It was a breathtaking admission wrapped in a pathetic boast. He was essentially saying that the violation didn't matter as long as the handiwork was good, that breaking and entering was a mere inconvenience, a small home repair project, rather than a profound and frightening betrayal that left a woman feeling unsafe in her own home. It was the final damning piece of evidence, not of the broken door, but of a broken man, whose moral compass had been so thoroughly scrambled by alcohol that he could no longer distinguish between a simple repair job and a fundamental assault on a friend's sense of security and peace. The lesson for the viewers: The tragic story of Lisa and Keith is a stark and powerful lesson in the destructive power of addiction and the absolute necessity of boundaries. It teaches us that addiction is not a solitary battle. Its collateral damage spreads to everyone in its orbit, especially innocent children. Hiding a problem, as Lisa did from her parents, only deepens the isolation and creates an environment where terrible choices, like trusting a fellow addict with access to your life and your home, can seem like the only option. This case screams the importance of seeking true, healthy support systems and of having the courage to be honest about your struggles. Furthermore, Keith's actions demonstrate that addiction can erode a person's character to the point where they justify any action, any violation, to feed their habit. The broken door is a symbol, but the real damage was to the trust and safety that should exist in a home. The lesson is clear. If you are in the grip of addiction, seek help immediately, because the path you are on leads not just to broken objects, but to broken lives and broken relationships that cannot be so easily fixed, no matter how skilled you are with your hands. Your life and the lives of those around you depend on it.